Every night, as the city sank into silence, I found myself staring at the ceiling, my mind consumed by thoughts of him, my boss. Sleep became an elusive stranger, slipping through my fingers like sand in an hourglass. My heart ached with a longing so intense it felt like a physical wound, throbbing and raw. Each day at work was a battlefield. I fought to maintain composure while secretly yearning for even the briefest glance from him. The office, once a place of professional ambition, had transformed into a labyrinth of emotions I couldn't escape. There were mornings when I stood in front of the mirror, rehearsing resignation speeches, convincing myself that leaving would be the only way to regain control over my spiraling feelings. But then, just as I resolved to walk away, he'd pass by my desk, his presence igniting a firestorm within me, and all resolve crumbled. How could I leave when every fiber of my being was tethered to him? Yet, staying was agony. I feared one misstep, a lingering gaze or an accidental brush of hands, would betray the secret I'd buried deep inside. The weight of this unspoken love pressed down on me, suffocating and relentless. It wasn't just about losing my job, it was about losing myself. Every morning I arrived early, not out of dedication but desperation, hoping to catch a glimpse of him before anyone else arrived. And every evening I stayed late, dreading the emptiness that awaited me at home. My life had become a storm, chaotic and merciless, with no shore in sight. The summons came like a thunderclap on an otherwise ordinary afternoon. "Kyla, I need to see you in my office. Now." His voice cut through the hum of the workplace, sharp and unyielding. My heart lurched in my chest as though it were trying to escape. The weight of those words pressed down on me, each step toward his office feeling heavier than the last. As I entered, the air seemed thick with tension, almost suffocating. He sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable but undeniably severe. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if he could hear the frantic pounding of my heart or see the panic rising in my eyes. "Kyla," he began, his tone clipped. "Your performance has been disappointing." Each word landed like a hammer blow, echoing in the silence between us. You arrive earlier than anyone else, stay later, yet your results are plummeting. His gaze bore into me, searching for answers I couldn't give without exposing the truth. That every early arrival was driven by desperation to catch even a glimpse of him. That every late departure was fueled by reluctance to leave his orbit. "If this doesn't improve," he continued, his voice colder now, "I'll have no choice but to let you go." My breath hitched and I felt the room tilt slightly. Losing my job would be catastrophic, but the thought of losing him, of being dismissed from his life entirely, was unbearable. I clenched my fists under the table, nails digging into my palms, anything to steady myself. "I understand," I managed to whisper, though my voice trembled despite my best efforts. Inside, my mind raced. Was this meeting truly about work, or had he somehow sensed the storm of emotions raging within me? Did he know how deeply I cared for him? Every second stretched endlessly, the ticking clock mocking my mounting anxiety. He leaned forward then, resting his elbows on the desk, his piercing eyes locking onto mine. "Do you?" he asked pointedly, skepticism lacing his tone. "Because right now, it feels like you're not taking this seriously." His accusation stung, not because it was unfair, but because it hit too close to the truth. How could I focus on spreadsheets and deadlines when my thoughts were consumed by him? When every task I completed was tinged with hope that he might notice? But admitting that would shatter everything. Instead, I nodded stiffly, forcing a semblance of composure. I'll do better, I promised, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Yet even as I spoke them, dread coiled in my stomach. Would he believe me? Or was I already too far gone? The air in the room was already suffocating, thick with tension as my boss grilled me about my declining performance. Just when I thought I'd managed to evade his probing questions, disaster struck. His sharp eyes landed on the notebook clutched tightly in my hands. Before I could react, he snatched it from me with an abruptness that made my stomach drop. "What are you constantly writing in this notebook?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. My heart thundered so loudly I feared he might hear it. Panic surged through me, cold sweat breaking out across my forehead and neck. The notebook wasn't just a collection of random thoughts. It was a sacred repository of my deepest feelings for him, filled with doodles of his name, fragments of imagined conversations, and even little sketches of us together. I opened my mouth to respond, but no coherent words came out, only stammers and broken syllables. It's nothing. I tried weakly, reaching instinctively toward him as if hoping to snatch it back. But he held it firmly, flipping through the pages with growing curiosity. Each page seemed to mock me, every scribble a betrayal of the secret I had fought so hard to conceal. His brow furrowed deeper with each passing second, and I felt the walls closing in around me. What could I say? That these were love notes meant for him? No, that would be professional suicide. Desperation clawed at my mind, forcing me to concoct a lie so absurd it bordered on ridiculous. I was talking about my boyfriend, I blurted out, my voice trembling under the weight of my own deceit. He froze mid-page turn, his piercing gaze snapping up to meet mine. "Your boyfriend?" he repeated slowly, skepticism dripping from every word. My pulse raced faster as I scrambled to elaborate. "Yes, his name is Enrique Iglesias, actually." The moment the words left my lips, I wanted to bury myself alive. Who names their supposed boyfriend after a famous singer? But I pressed on, digging the hole deeper. He's Spanish, or half Spanish, and we've been dating for months. I draw pictures of him all the time because, I'm very artistic. My cheeks burned with shame as I forced a laugh, the sound brittle and unnatural. His expression shifted subtly, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. For a fleeting instant, I thought I saw hurt flash across his face, but then it vanished, replaced by polite indifference. "Oh," he said simply, handing the notebook back to me. As our fingers brushed briefly during the exchange, I felt a jolt of electricity shoot through me. A cruel reminder of how hopelessly tangled my emotions were. I cradled the notebook against my chest like a lifeline, praying silently that he wouldn't ask any more questions. Little did I know this desperate fabrication would only spiral the situation further into chaos, leaving both of us trapped in a web of misunderstandings neither of us could untangle. The meeting had barely begun when his voice cut through the room like a blade, sharp and final. "Kyla," he said, his tone devoid of warmth, "I've decided to transfer you to another branch." The words hit me like a freight train, stealing the air from my lungs. My knees buckled, and I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, colors blurring at the edges as if reality itself was unraveling. A transfer? To another branch? It felt less like a professional decision and more like an exile, a deliberate act to push me out of his life forever. I wanted to scream, to protest, but my throat tightened, choking off any sound. All I could manage was a faint whisper. What? What did you say? His expression remained unreadable, though I thought I detected a flicker of something. Guilt? Regret? Before it vanished behind his usual stoic mask. It's for the best, he continued, his voice clipped. Your performance has been inconsistent, and this move will give you a fresh start. Fresh start? The phrase echoed mockingly in my mind. Was this his way of saying goodbye? Of severing ties without having to confront the truth? That I had lied about everything? That I had let fear dictate my choices? I felt nauseous, the weight of my own cowardice pressing down on me like a leaden blanket. As the news spread through the office, whispers erupted around me like a swarm of bees. Did you hear? One colleague murmured to another, their eyes darting toward me with thinly veiled pity. She must have really messed up. Each word stung like a needle piercing my skin. Their judgment wasn't just about my work, it felt personal, as if they could see straight through me, exposing the tangled web of lies I'd woven. My face burned with shame, and I fought back tears, clutching my notebook, the same one that had sparked this entire mess, as if it could somehow shield me from the storm brewing around me. But the worst part wasn't the humiliation or the impending transfer. It was the realization that I had brought this upon myself. Every lie, every evasion had led me here, to this moment where I stood on the precipice of losing not only my job, but also the man I loved. And yet, even as despair threatened to swallow me whole, a small defiant spark ignited within me. If this was truly the end, then I would fight, not just for my career, but for him, for us. Because walking away now would mean surrendering not only to failure, but to fear itself. The day after the devastating announcement of my transfer, I found myself wandering aimlessly through the office corridors during lunch break, trying to piece together what had gone so horribly wrong. My mind was a storm of regret and self-loathing. Every corner seemed to echo with memories of him. The way he'd look at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The rare smiles that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. And then it happened. A moment that would change everything. As I passed by the conference room, I overheard voices inside. His voice, low and hesitant, mingling with another colleague's casual tone. I don't know, man, he confessed, frustration seeping into his words. I've tried talking to her privately several times, but something always stops me. It's like I'm scared she'll reject me. My heart skipped a beat as I pressed closer to the doorframe, careful not to make a sound. Was he really talking about me? The same man who had just handed down my transfer orders? My hands trembled against the wall as I strained to listen further. And now this whole boyfriend thing, it's ridiculous. Enrique Iglesias? Really? He let out a bitter laugh, though there was an unmistakable ache beneath it. But even before that, I couldn't stop looking at her. She doesn't notice, does she? From across the room behind her desk, whenever I could steal a glance without being obvious, my knees nearly buckled again, this time from shock rather than despair. All those mornings when I thought I was sneaking glances at him unnoticed, he'd been watching me too. Every accidental brush in the hallway, every fleeting eye contact, it hadn't been one-sided. Suddenly, the weight of my lies crashed down on me harder than ever. How could I have misjudged him so completely? Here he was, pouring out his insecurities to someone else while I had convinced myself he saw me as nothing more than a failing employee. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision, but I forced myself to stay silent and listen. His colleague responded lightly, attempting to ease the tension. Maybe you should just tell her how you feel. What's the worst that could happen? There was a long pause, heavy with unspoken emotions. When he finally spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. She's already moving to another branch. Maybe it's better this way. If she has someone else, I shouldn't interfere. His resignation stung worse than any accusation ever could. In that moment, I realized the depth of his feelings and the magnitude of my mistake. By hiding behind falsehoods, I had pushed him away, forcing him to retreat into silence and doubt. But it wasn't too late. Not yet. Not if I acted quickly. That night, after hearing his confession to his colleague, my mind raced with 1,000 conflicting emotions. I couldn't let him transfer me without fighting for us, for the truth. The next morning, I marched into his office, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I'm transferring to the same branch, I declared, my voice trembling but resolute. His eyes widened in shock, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then he leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. Kyla, are you sure about this? It's not just your career on the line. It's everything. His words echoed in my ears long after I left his office. He was right. The stakes were unimaginably high. When I broke the news to my family that evening, their reaction was even worse than I'd feared. My mother's face turned pale as she gripped the edge of the dining table. You're throwing away your future over some infatuation? She snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. My father, usually calm and measured, slammed his fist on the table. Do you realize what you're risking? If this doesn't work out, you'll have nothing, no job, no stability, no reputation. Their voices swirled around me, a cacophony of anger and disbelief, each word slicing deeper into my resolve. But the battle didn't end there. That night, alone in my room, I wrestled with my own thoughts, torn between fear and determination. What if I was wrong? What if following my heart led to disaster? The possibility of losing everything loomed large. A failed relationship would mean not only professional ruin, but also personal humiliation. My hands trembled as I clutched the edges of my blanket, staring at the ceiling. Every doubt whispered louder than ever. What if he doesn't feel the same way once we're closer? What if I'm making the biggest mistake of my life? Yet beneath the storm of uncertainty, something stronger burned within me. A fierce desire to fight for what I truly wanted. For him, the days that followed were agonizing. At work, whispers grew louder, colleagues speculating about my sudden decision to follow him. Some pitied me. Others mocked me behind closed doors. She's chasing him like a lovesick puppy, one muttered under her breath, though loud enough for me to hear. Each comment felt like a dagger piercing my confidence, yet I forced myself to hold my head high. I reminded myself why I had made this choice. Not for validation or fleeting passion, but because love, real love, was worth every risk. Then came the phone call that nearly shattered me. A close friend who worked in HR called late one evening, her tone grave. Kyla, I don't know how to tell you this, but they're considering replacing you entirely. They've already started interviewing candidates for your position. My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, the phone slipping from my grasp. Replacing me? After all I'd sacrificed? The thought of losing not just him, but also my career, the very foundation of my identity, was unbearable. Tears streamed down my face as I sat there, clutching my knees, feeling utterly defeated. But even in my darkest hour, a small voice inside urged me to keep going. I had come too far to turn back now. The storm outside mirrored the tempest raging within me as I stood outside his office door, my hands trembling and my heart pounding like a war drum. Rain lashed against the windows in violent streaks, lightning illuminating the dim hallway with fleeting bursts of brilliance. It was as if nature itself conspired to heighten the tension of this moment, the moment I would finally confess everything. Taking a deep breath, I knocked softly before stepping inside. He looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his face. "Kyla, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. I need to talk to you," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. The words felt heavy on my tongue, each syllable weighted with fear and uncertainty. I closed the door behind me, sealing us off from the world, but also trapping myself in this confession. My legs threatened to give way beneath me, but I forced myself to take another step closer. "It's about everything." His brow furrowed, confusion clouding his features. "Everything?" he echoed, leaning back slightly in his chair. Tears welled up in my eyes before I could stop them, spilling down my cheeks in hot, unrelenting streams. "I've lied to you," I choked out, my voice breaking under the weight of guilt. "About Enrique, about my boyfriend, it was all a lie. There is no one else. Just you. Always you." My knees buckled then, and I sank into the chair opposite him, sobbing uncontrollably. Every emotion I'd suppressed for so long came pouring out. Shame, regret, longing, all crashing over me like waves in a hurricane. For what felt like an eternity, there was only silence. The rain continued its relentless assault on the windows, the sound filling the void between us. His expression remained unreadable. His eyes locked onto mine as though searching for something hidden beneath the tears. Each second stretched longer than the last, every tick of the clock amplifying the tension until it became almost unbearable. Did he hate me now? Had I ruined any chance we might have had? My chest tightened with dread, making it hard to breathe. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft but deliberate. "Why did you lie?" The question hung in the air, simple yet devastating in its clarity. I wiped at my tears with shaking hands, struggling to compose myself enough to answer. "Because I was afraid," I admitted, my voice still quivering. "Afraid that you didn't feel the same way. Afraid of losing not just my job, but you." Another tear slipped down my cheek as I added, "And when I heard you talking to your colleague that day, I realized how wrong I'd been. How much I'd misjudged everything." He leaned forward then, resting his elbows on the desk, his gaze never leaving mine. For a moment, I thought he might reject me outright, and the thought made my stomach churn. But then, unexpectedly, his expression softened. "Do you know how long I've waited for this?" he murmured, almost to himself. "How many times I wanted to tell you how I felt, but I thought you were happy with someone else." His words sent a jolt through me, hope flickering faintly in the darkness of my despair. You care about me?" I whispered, hardly daring to believe it. His response was a slow nod, followed by a small, hesitant smile. "More than I should, probably." Relief washed over me like a tidal wave, but before either of us could say more, the lights flickered briefly, a reminder of the storm still raging outside. In that moment, I realized that while the worst had passed, our journey was far from over. Yet for the first time, I allowed myself to truly believe that love, no matter how complicated, was worth fighting for. Some people leave scars, others leave lessons. Burn and reborn stories that break you, then rebuild you.